What if a single DNA test proved that the family who raised you was never your family at all? No adoption papers. No hospital mistake. Just a lie so carefully protected that it took 32 years and one cheap plastic tube to expose it. And within 48 hours of that truth coming out, someone would be dead. Marcus Chen never questioned his place in the tight-knit Anderson family of suburban Atlanta. For 32 years, he was simply Mark, the beloved son of Robert and Patricia Anderson, brother to their golden child, Derek. The Andersons were Georgia royalty. Robert's construction empire had built half the strip malls in Gwinnett County, and the family's 4th of July barbecues were legendary neighborhood events where local politicians mingled with business moguls over perfectly grilled steaks and Patricia's famous peach cobbler. The Anderson compound in Roswell was a testament to Robert's success, a sprawling plantation-style mansion with white columns, manicured gardens that required a full-time staff, and a circular driveway where luxury vehicles gleamed under the Georgia sun. Growing up there had been like living in a magazine spread, everything picture-perfect, everything exactly as it should be. Marcus had always been different from Derek, quieter, more introspective, drawn to architecture rather than the aggressive deal-making that came naturally to his older brother. While Derek had Robert's steel-gray eyes and commanding presence, the same aggressive handshake and booming laugh that closed million-dollar deals, Marcus had always been told he took after Patricia's side of the family. "You have your grandmother Chen's artistic sensibility," Patricia would say, though Marcus had never met any of the Chen relatives she claimed existed in California. When he'd asked about visiting them as a teenager, Patricia had grown vague, mentioning estrangements and old family grudges that were too complicated to explain. Derek, 5 years older, had embraced the family business with zealous enthusiasm. He graduated from Georgia Tech with a business degree and immediately joined Anderson Construction as a project manager, working his way up through positions that everyone knew were inevitable stepping stones to eventually running the empire. He drove a Mercedes, lived in a Buckhead penthouse, and dated women who looked like they'd stepped off magazine covers. Derek was everything Robert had hoped for in an heir, aggressive, ambitious, willing to do whatever it took to close a deal. Marcus, by contrast, had studied architecture at Georgia State, fascinated by the way buildings could shape human experience. He joined the family company too, but in a different capacity, designing the developments that Derek sold. It was a comfortable arrangement, or so Marcus had thought. He worked from his own office downtown, creating blueprints and renderings, while Derek handled a hard-nosed business of construction management and client relations. Everything changed on a lazy Sunday afternoon in March when Marcus opened a birthday gift from his wife, Jennifer. They'd been married for 5 years, and Jennifer had developed a fascination with genealogy after attending a family reunion where distant cousins shared old photographs and stories. She'd been on an ancestry kick lately, having discovered her own surprising Ashkenazi Jewish heritage through a DNA test. A grandmother who'd immigrated from Poland had hidden her Jewish identity to escape persecution, and Jennifer had spent months piecing together that lost history. "Let's see what we're made of," she'd laughed, swabbing her cheek with a cotton applicator from the DNA kit she'd bought for both of them. "Maybe you've got some exotic ancestry hiding in there too, Viking raiders or Chinese emperors or something." Marcus followed suit, expecting maybe some Irish heritage to explain his pale skin that burned in the Georgia sun, perhaps a splash of Italian to explain his olive complexion and dark hair, maybe some Native American ancestry that many Southern families claimed. He sealed the tube, dropped it in the prepaid mailer, and forgot about it as he returned to his current project, a mixed-use development in Sandy Springs that was consuming all his creative energy. 6 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon while Jennifer was at work, the email arrived. Marcus sat in their Buckhead condo's home office, rain pattering against the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Atlanta skyline, his third cup of coffee growing cold in his hand as he stared at his laptop screen. The subject line read, "Your ancestry DNA results are ready." He clicked through, expecting colorful pie charts showing percentages of European, Asian, and African ancestry. Instead, he found something that made his blood run cold. The ethnicity estimate was interesting enough. 42% Southern European, 31% Eastern European, 18% Western Asian, 9% broadly European. But it was the DNA matches that stopped his heart. According to the results, he shared zero DNA with Derek Anderson. Not the 50% that full siblings should share. Not 25% like half-siblings. Not even a trace of distant cousinhood that might explain away a testing error. 0. Complete strangers. The system didn't even list Derek as a match. He simply didn't appear in Marcus's family tree at all. In that moment, Marcus didn't just lose a brother. He lost his name, his inheritance, and his place in one of Georgia's most powerful families. Marcus refreshed the page 3 times, certain there had been some computer glitch, but the results remained the same. He pulled up Derek's account. His brother had taken the test 2 years ago during his own genealogy phase and had shared the results with Marcus. Derek's matches showed their father's sister, Aunt Linda, at the expected percentage. They showed second cousins on the Anderson side. They showed the genetic fingerprints of a family tree that stretched back generations in Georgia. Marcus's results showed none of these people. It was as if he'd been born into a completely different family. Impossible. They had the same parents. The same childhood home on Riverside Drive before the move to Roswell. The same memories of fishing trips to Lake Lanier, where Robert had taught them both to cast lines from the dock at dawn. The same stories about Dad teaching them to ride bikes in Piedmont Park. Derek first because he was older, then Marcus 3 years later. The same family vacations to Tybee Island, where they built sandcastles and hunted for shells and gotten matching sunburns. There were photo albums documenting every stage of their childhood together. Christmas mornings in matching pajamas, first days of school, Little League games where Robert cheered from the bleachers. How could none of it be real? His hands trembling, Marcus called the testing company's customer service line. The hold music seemed to mock him, a cheerful jingle about discovering your roots and connecting with your past. When someone finally answered, Marcus struggled to keep his voice steady. "There must be a mistake," he told a representative, a woman with a gentle southern accent that reminded him painfully of his mother. "The results say I share no DNA with my brother, but we have the same parents. We grew up together. There has to be an error in the testing process." "I understand this is difficult news, sir," she replied, her tone practiced and sympathetic. "But our accuracy rate is 99.9%. We use the most advanced genotyping technology available. The likelihood of an error is extremely small. But 0%? Not even a tiny percentage that might indicate distant relation? 0% means no detectable shared DNA segments above our threshold for relatedness. Have you considered that you might be adopted? Or perhaps there was a non-paternity event in your family history?" Non-paternity event. Such a clinical, bloodless term for what it really meant. Someone had lied. Someone had cheated. Someone's entire life was built on a foundation of deception. "I'm not adopted," Marcus said firmly. "I have birth certificates, hospital records, baby pictures. I was born at Northside Hospital on March 15th, 1992. My mother has told me the story of my birth 1,000 times. Sometimes adoptions are closed or not disclosed to children, the representative suggested carefully. Or sometimes there are situations where the assumed father isn't the biological father, but I need to speak to a supervisor. This can't be right." The supervisor told him the same thing in a slightly more authoritative voice. The test was accurate. The results were clear. If he wanted certainty, he could order a confirmatory test, but the outcome would be identical. DNA didn't lie. But families did, apparently. Marcus spent the next 3 hours in a rabbit hole of online research, his architectural blueprints for the Sandy Springs project abandoned on his desk. He learned about switched-at birth cases, though those typically affected both children involved, and Derek's DNA clearly matched the Anderson family tree. He read about affairs and secret adoptions, about families torn apart by similar discoveries, about support groups for people dealing with NP, not parent expected. He found forums where people shared their stories. A woman who discovered at 50 that her father wasn't her father. A man who learned his mother had been raped and had never told anyone. A teenager who found out she was a product of her mother's affair with her father's best friend. The stories were heartbreaking, but they all had one thing in common. Once you knew the truth, you couldn't unknow it. The revelation changed everything, contaminated every memory, recontextualized every family interaction. Marcus thought about his childhood with new eyes. Had Patricia treated him differently than Derek? He'd always attributed her slight favoritism toward him to his being the baby of the family, but now he wondered if it was guilt. Had Robert sensed something was off? Was that why he'd always been slightly harder on Marcus, demanding more, criticizing more readily? Or was Marcus inventing patterns that didn't exist, retrofitting his memories to match this new, terrible reality? By 7 p.m., he'd made a decision. He needed to confront his mother. If anyone had answers, it would be Patricia. That evening, Marcus drove to his parents' Roswell mansion unannounced, his Audi navigating the familiar tree-lined streets on autopilot. The spring evening was beautiful, dogwoods in bloom, the air fragrant with wisteria, the kind of perfect southern evening that belonged in a postcard. But Marcus felt like he was driving through a nightmare. The house loomed before him, Robert's plantation-style showpiece with its white columns and wraparound porch. Marcus had played in these gardens as a child, had his first kiss behind the rose bushes when he was 15, had celebrated every major life event in these rooms. But tonight the mansion felt alien, like a movie set of someone else's life, a carefully constructed facade hiding terrible secrets. He parked in the circular driveway next to his mother's white Mercedes and walked to the front door. His keys still worked. Patricia had insisted both her sons keep keys even after they'd moved out, maintaining the fiction that this would always be their home. His mother answered his knock almost immediately, as if she'd been nearby. Patricia Anderson was 58 but looked a decade younger, her blonde hair perfectly styled in the soft waves she'd worn for 30 years, her makeup flawless even at 8 p.m. on a Thursday. She wore expensive casual wear, designer jeans, and a silk blouse that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Everything about Patricia was carefully maintained, carefully controlled, carefully perfect. When she saw Marcus's expression, he knew he must look wild, disheveled from hours of research and mounting panic. Something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe guilt, definitely recognition that this moment had finally arrived. In that split second before she composed herself, Marcus saw the truth written in her eyes. She knew. She'd always known. And she'd been dreading this conversation for 32 years. "We need to talk about my DNA test," Marcus said quietly, clutching the printed results in his hand. He'd printed them out, needing the physical proof, the tangible evidence that this wasn't just some computer error. Patricia's wine glass, a Waterford crystal goblet filled with her favorite Pinot Noir, slipped from her fingers as if in slow motion. It shattered across the marble foyer, red liquid spreading like blood across the white stone, glass fragments glittering under the chandelier's light like scattered diamonds. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet house. From the study down the hall, Robert's voice called out, deep and commanding as always, the voice that had negotiated million-dollar deals and intimidated competitors for 4 decades. "Who's there, Patty? Everything okay?" Patricia's eyes locked on Marcus, and in that moment he saw 32 years of carefully guarded secrets threatening to spill out. Her voice came out as barely a whisper, so quiet Marcus almost didn't hear it. Nobody important. Those 2 words hit Marcus like a physical blow, like a fist to his solar plexus. Nobody important. After 3 decades of being her son, of Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings and Mother's Day brunches, of school plays where she sat in the front row and graduations where she cried proud tears, of every moment that should have bonded them as mother and child. He was suddenly nobody important. Not her son, just a mistake, just a problem that had finally come home to roost. "We need to talk," Marcus repeated, his voice harder now, loud enough that Robert might hear from the study. "Now, either here or somewhere else, but we're having this conversation tonight." Patricia glanced toward the study where Robert was likely reviewing construction contracts or checking stock prices, then back at Marcus. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength, her manicured nails digging into his jacket hard enough to leave marks. Her perfectly composed facade cracked, and suddenly she looked every one of her 58 years. "Not here. Not now. Meet me tomorrow at the Peachtree Cafe, noon. Please, Marcus. Give me one night to figure out how to explain this. One night to prepare what I need to say." "Explain what? That my entire life has been a lie? That I'm not who I thought I was? That every family memory, every moment I thought we shared as a family, was built on deception? Please." Her eyes were brimming with tears now, her composure completely shattered. Mascara began to run in thin black tracks down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. "One night, 24 hours. Then I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you the whole truth, I swear. But I need time to think about how to say it, how to make you understand." "Understand what?" "How you lied to me for 32 years. "Marcus, please." Her voice broke. "If your father hears this, if he learns the truth like this, it will destroy everything. The company, the family, all of it. Just give me until tomorrow. Let me figure out how to tell him. Let me control how this comes out." Marcus pulled away from her grip and turned toward the door. Behind him, he could hear Patricia's sobs, quiet and desperate. He didn't look back. He couldn't. If he looked at her, he might either forgive her or say something he'd regret forever. "Tomorrow," he said without turning around. "Noon. And if you're not there, if you try to avoid this, I'm coming back here and telling Dad everything myself." He left her standing in the foyer among the broken glass and spilled wine, her sobs following him to his car. As he backed out the driveway, he saw her silhouette in the doorway, a perfect picture of grief. Marcus didn't know it then, driving away from his childhood home for what would turn out to be one of the last times. But those two words, "nobody important," would ignite a firestorm that, within 48 hours, would leave one person dead and expose just how far this family was willing to go to protect their secret. The DNA test that was supposed to be a fun birthday gift, a harmless exploration of ancestry, had instead become a hand grenade with the pin pulled. An explosion was coming. By sunrise, Marcus would know the truth about his birth. By nightfall, he would realize that truth had put him in danger. And somewhere between those two moments, a line would be crossed that could never be undone. Patricia didn't wait until noon. At 6:47 a.m., Marcus's phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling him from a fitful sleep filled with fractured dreams of family gatherings where everyone wore masks. Jennifer stirred beside him but didn't wake. She'd worked late at a hospital where she was a pediatric nurse and had come home after midnight to find Marcus sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. He'd told her everything. She'd held him while he cried, the first time he'd cried in years, and told him that whatever the DNA said, he was still himself. But Marcus didn't feel like himself anymore. He felt like a stranger wearing Marcus Chen skin. The text from Patricia was brief. "Come to the house now. Robert's playing golf until 10. We need to talk before this goes any further. Please, I'm begging you." Marcus arrived at the Roswell mansion at 7:15 to find his mother already dressed despite the early hour, her eyes red-rimmed but her makeup perfect, every hair in place. She'd clearly been awake all night. They sat in the sunroom where Marcus had eaten countless breakfasts as a child, where sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows onto plants his mother tended with obsessive care. It had always been her favorite room, a sanctuary of green growing things and morning light. Now it felt like a confessional. Patricia's confession poured out in ragged whispers, words she'd held back for over 3 decades finally breaking free like water through a cracked dam. She spoke quickly, as if afraid she'd lose her nerve as she paused, her hands twisting a cloth napkin into knots. In 1991, she and Robert had been going through what she delicately called a difficult period. Robert was obsessed with expanding the business, working 18-hour days, sometimes sleeping at the office on a leather couch that still sat in his study. He missed dinners, missed anniversaries, missed Derek's elementary school concerts and soccer games. The company was his mistress, and Patricia felt like she barely existed. "I was so lonely," she said, staring at her hands. I know that sounds pathetic, like a cliché from a bad movie. The neglected wife. But it was true. We'd have entire weeks where we barely spoke to each other except about logistics, who was picking up Derek from practice, whether we needed to call the landscaper. We were roommates, not partners, not lovers. That's when Vincent Calabrese entered the picture. Vincent had been Robert's business partner in the early days, back when Anderson Construction was just two guys with a pickup truck and big dreams. He'd been the charming one, the smooth talker who schmoozed clients while Robert handled the actual construction work. Together, they'd built the company from nothing into something real, something profitable. But Vincent had problems. He drank too much, gambled too much, made promises he couldn't keep. By 1990, Robert had bought him out, paying him a generous settlement to dissolve the partnership before Vincent's problems dragged down the whole enterprise. Most business relationships would have ended there, but Patricia and Vincent had remained friends. He'd been at their wedding. He was Derek's godfather, for God's sake. He was around a lot that year, Patricia continued, her voice barely above a whisper. He'd stop by to see Derek, bring him presents. He was working as a project manager for another construction company, trying to get his life together. He'd quit drinking, was going to GA meetings. He seemed different, better, more present than Robert was. The affair started innocently enough. Conversations in the kitchen while Derek played in the yard, then coffee meetings that turned into lunches, then afternoon meetings at Vincent's apartment that Patricia told herself were just friendship, just two lonely people connecting. She knew she was lying to herself even then. "It lasted 3 months, she said, tears streaming down her face now, ruining her makeup just as it had the night before. Just 3 months. I felt so guilty, so ashamed. I ended it, told Vincent it was a mistake, that I loved Robert, that we could never see each other again outside of group settings. But by then she was pregnant. The timeline was ambiguous enough to give her plausible deniability. She and Robert had still been intimate, if infrequently. When she told him she was expecting, he was surprised but pleased. A second child would cement the dynasty he was building. He never questioned whether the baby was his. "And Vincent?" Marcus asked, his voice hollow. "I never told him. He never knew. When you were born and I saw those amber eyes, Vincent's eyes, not Robert's, not mine, I knew. But I told myself it didn't matter. Biology didn't matter. Robert was your father in every way that counted. He changed your diapers, taught you to ride a bike, went to your school plays. He loved you." "Did he, though?" Marcus heard the bitterness in his own voice. Or did he love the son he thought he had? Did he love the Anderson heir, not Marcus Chen? Patricia flinched. "You're still his son. You're still Derek's brother. DNA doesn't change 32 years of being a family. Doesn't it?" Marcus stood, unable to sit still anymore. "Derek knows, doesn't he? That's why you're panicking. He knows something." "No." Patricia stood too, grabbing his arm. "God, no. Derek can't know. Marcus, you have to understand. Your father's company operates under a family trust his father established in 1975. Franklin Anderson was old-fashioned, paranoid about the family legacy. The trust specifies that ownership and control pass only to legitimate heirs, blood descendants in the male line. If Robert finds out you're not his biological son, you lose everything. Your position in the company, your inheritance, everything. I don't care about the money. Maybe you don't, but Derek will. Derek has always been jealous of you, of how easy success comes to you, of how Robert lights up when you show him your designs. Derek works twice as hard for half the approval. If he finds out you're not really his brother, not really competition for the inheritance. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Derek isn't a bad person, but he's ambitious. He's ruthless. He's Robert's son through and through. Marcus's phone buzzed. Derek, Dad's asking about you. Where are you? Board meeting prep at 9. Don't be late. The board meeting. Marcus had almost forgotten. Robert was planning to announce the new corporate structure, including Marcus's promotion to VP of Development. Derek was being named VP of Operations. On paper, they'd be equals. But everyone knew Robert saw Marcus's role as more visionary, more essential to the company's future. Derek had been drinking more lately, making snide comments about artistic types who didn't understand the real work of construction. I need time to process this, Marcus said, pulling away from his mother's grip. The chair scraped against the tile floor as he moved toward the door. Marcus, please, there's more you need to know. Patricia's voice took on an urgent, almost panic quality. About Vincent, about who he is now. Marcus turned back. What about him? Vincent Calabrese is dangerous. After we ended things, after you were born, his life fell apart again. He started drinking, gambling, got mixed up with bad people. In 1998, there was an incident at a bar in Marietta, a fight over gambling debts. Vincent killed a man, not intentionally, the lawyer said, but the man died anyway. Vincent served 12 years in Georgia State Prison for voluntary manslaughter. Marcus didn't know it yet, but this revelation had just put two men on a collision course. Marcus felt the room spinning. You're telling me my biological father is a convicted killer? He's been out for 6 years now. He runs a salvage yard in Marietta. Stays out of trouble as far as I know. But Marcus, if he finds out you're his son, if he thinks there's money involved, if he sees an opportunity to leverage this secret somehow... She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. You think he'd blackmail us? I don't know what he'd do. I haven't spoken to him in over 20 years. People change in prison, usually not for the better. I'm just saying you need to be careful. This secret has stayed buried for 32 years for good reasons. Some truths don't set you free. They just destroy everything they touch. Marcus should have listened to his mother's warning. He should have let the secret stay buried, should have destroyed the DNA results, and pretended nothing had changed. But he couldn't. The need to know, to see, to understand where he'd really come from consumed him like a fever. He spent the morning in a fog at the board meeting prep, barely functioning while Robert outlined expansion plans, and Derek shot him suspicious glances. His father seemed oblivious to any tension, excited about the company's future, about his sons working together to build something even bigger than what he created. The Anderson legacy, Robert said proudly, gesturing to the architectural renderings Marcus had created for their next development, a mixed-use space that would reshape downtown Marietta. 3 generations of builders. My father, myself, and now you boys carrying it forward. Except Marcus wasn't an Anderson. He was a Calabrese, son of a convicted killer, a cuckoo in the nest who'd been stealing Derek's birthright for over 3 decades. That afternoon, telling himself he was just going to drive by and look, Marcus found himself navigating to Industrial Boulevard in Marietta. Calabrese Auto Salvage sat on a weedy lot surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. The yard was filled with cannibalized cars in various states of disassembly, their skeletons rusting in neat rows like a mechanical graveyard. A hand-painted sign advertised quality used parts, and "We buy junk cars." It was about as far from Anderson Construction's gleaming corporate headquarters as you could get. Vincent Calabrese was in his mid-60s now, weathered and muscular in a way that spoke of hard physical labor rather than gym memberships. He wore grease-stained coveralls and was hunched over an engine block, powerful forearms slick with oil as he wrestled a stubborn bolt. His hair was steel gray, his face lined and tanned from years working outdoors. When he turned around, wiping his hands on a rag, Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. It was like looking into a time-warped mirror, like seeing his own future written in another man's features. Vincent had the same amber eyes, That distinctive color Marcus had never seen in any Anderson family photo. The color that doctors had told Patricia was a rare genetic variant. The same sharp jawline that Marcus saw in his mirror every morning. The same way of tilting his head slightly when concentrating. A gesture Marcus had never noticed in himself until seeing it reflected in the stranger. The resemblance was unmistakable, damning, impossible to explain away as coincidence. "Help you?" Vincent's voice was rough, suspicious, the voice of a man who'd learned to trust no one. His gaze traveled over Marcus's expensive suit and designer watch with obvious disdain. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where men wore $1,000 shoes. Marcus's courage evaporated like morning dew. All the questions he wanted to ask, all the confrontations he'd imagined, disappeared. He was suddenly just a scared kid way out of his depth, just looking for parts for a '68 Mustang, he stammered. "Sorry, wrong place." "We got plenty of Mustangs." Vincent stepped closer, still studying Marcus's face with an intensity that made Marcus's skin crawl. "Classic car collector? You don't look the type." "No, I made a mistake. I was looking for a different salvage yard." But as Marcus turned to leave, hurrying toward his Audi like a man fleeing a crime scene, his heart hammering against his ribs, Vincent called out, "Hey, wait a minute." Marcus froze, hand on his car door. "You look familiar," Vincent said, walking toward him with slow, deliberate steps. "Real familiar. Do I know your people? You from around here?" "No, I don't think so. I'm from Atlanta." "Huh." Vincent scratched his jaw, still staring. "Swear I know you from somewhere. You sure we haven't met?" "I'm sure. I've got to go." Marcus got in his car and drove away, watching Vincent's confused, almost haunted expression recede in his rear-view mirror. The old man stood in the middle of his salvage yard, hands on his hips, watching the Audi disappear down Industrial Boulevard like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't have all the pieces for. Marcus had to pull over 2 blocks away, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't safely drive. He sat in a Kroger parking lot, breathing deeply, trying to calm his racing heart. That was his father, his real father, a stranger who lived in a salvage yard and had killed a man and looked at him with eyes identical to his own. What the hell was he supposed to do with that information? Marcus drove away knowing 2 things. The man who shared his blood was capable of killing, and the brother who shared his life was starting to suspect the truth. By the time police arrived at the Anderson estate, the truth no longer mattered. Blood had already rewritten everything. One brother was dead. Another was standing at the center of a family secret that had finally turned lethal. And Marcus Chen, the man who didn't share their blood, was about to become the easiest person to blame. Because when a powerful family starts to fall apart, the outsider is always the first suspect. Just hours earlier, the Anderson family had still been pretending everything could be contained, and the person who would place Marcus at the scene was the last person anyone expected. That evening, everything that had been simmering beneath the surface finally exploded. Derek showed up at Marcus's Buckhead condo at 9:47 p.m., drunk and aggressive and spoiling for a fight. Jennifer was at her book club. Thank God she wasn't there to see this. So Marcus was alone when his brother started pounding on the door hard enough to wake the neighbors. "Open up, little brother." Derek's voice was slurred, ugly. "We need to talk." Marcus opened the door to find Derek swaying in the hallway, reeking of whiskey and rage, his expensive suit rumpled and his tie loosened. His eyes were bloodshot, his carefully styled hair mussed. This wasn't social drinking. Derek was blackout drunk. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked, though he could already guess. "What did you say to Mom?" Derek demanded, pushing past Marcus into the living room without invitation. "She's been weird for 2 days. Crying, not eating, won't talk to Dad. What's going on?" "Nothing. Just family stuff. She's stressed about the company expansion." "Bullshit." Derek wheeled around, pointing an accusing finger. "Don't lie to me. I saw her yesterday. Tried to ask what was wrong. She looked at me like I was a stranger, like she didn't even know me. But you know something, don't you? You did something, said something. What was it? Derek, you're drunk. You should go home. Sleep this off. I'm drunk. Derek laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it, bitter as bile. Yeah, I'm drunk. You know why? Because I'm tired. I'm tired of playing second fiddle to perfect Marcus. I'm tired of Dad talking about your brilliant designs while I do all the real work of actually building things. I'm tired of Mom looking at you like you hung the moon while I'm just there. Background noise. That's not true. It is true. Derek moved closer, invading Marcus's space, using his height advantage to intimidate. He'd always been bigger, more physical. You've always been her favorite. Always. Even when you screwed up, even when you disappointed Dad. She defended you. But me? I work myself half to death for this company and get a pat on the head. What makes you so goddamn special? Nothing makes me special, Derek. You're imagining things. Am I? Derek's eyes narrowed, suddenly focusing despite the alcohol. Or maybe there's something going on I don't know about. Maybe you're trying to poison them against me. Maybe you want to push me out entirely, take the whole company for yourself. That's insane. Is it? Dad's about to make you VP, equal to me. But everyone knows your position is more important. Everyone knows Dad sees you as a visionary, the future. Where does that leave me? I'm just the grunt, the muscle, the guy who makes sure the concrete gets poured on time. Derek, I don't want to compete with you. Then quit. Derek shoved him, and Marcus stumbled back against the kitchen counter. If you don't want to compete, then quit the company. Go work somewhere else. Let me have what should have been mine from the beginning. The brothers argued for another 30 minutes. Accusations flying back and forth, old resentments bubbling to the surface like toxic waste. Derek brought up every childhood slight. Every time he felt overlooked, every moment when Marcus had gotten attention or praise that Derek thought should have been his. Marcus tried to stay calm, tried to de-escalate, but Derek was beyond reason, feeding his rage with memories real and imagined until he'd worked himself into a frenzy. Finally, Derek stormed toward the door, nearly tripping over the coffee table. You think you're so smart, he snarled. You think you've got everything figured out. But I'm watching you, little brother. Whatever game you're playing, whatever you're hiding, I'll figure it out. And when I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of snake you really are. I'm not hiding anything, Marcus lied. Liar. Derek pointed at him one more time, swaying dangerously. Blood always tells in the end. Remember that. Blood always tells. The irony of that statement would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. Derek slammed the door, so hard a picture frame fell off the wall, glass shattering across the hardwood floor. Marcus stood in his destroyed living room, listening to his brother's heavy footsteps receding down the hallway, and wondered if their relationship had just crossed a line it could never come back from. He had no idea how prophetic that thought would be. At 6:47 a.m. the next morning, exactly 24 hours after his mother's desperate text, Marcus's phone rang with a call that would change everything. He was in the kitchen making coffee. Jennifer already gone for an early shift at the hospital, when Detective Sarah Morrison's calm, professional voice asked if he could come down to the station to answer some questions. Questions about what? Marcus asked, though some instinct already knew the answer wouldn't be good. It's about your brother, sir, Derek Anderson. I'm afraid there's been an incident. Marcus's coffee cup slipped from his hand, shattering on the tile floor just like his mother's wine glass had 2 days before. Hot liquid spread across the floor. Another crime scene in miniature. Another broken thing that could never be made whole. They'd found Derek's Mercedes wrapped around a Georgia pine tree on a deserted stretch of old Marietta Road, less than half a mile from Calabrese Auto Salvage. The car was crumpled like a beer can, Derek's body still strapped in the driver's seat, his face frozen in an expression that might have been surprise or fear or both. At first, the responding officers assumed it was a tragic drunk driving accident. Derek's blood alcohol was nearly twice the legal limit, and the road was known for accidents on its sharp curves. Another cautionary tale about the dangers of drinking and driving. But the crime scene investigators found something the patrol officers had missed. 2 bullet holes in Derek's chest, partially obscured by the damage from the crash. Derek Anderson hadn't died in an accident. Someone had shot him twice in the heart, then staged the crash to make it look like he'd simply lost control of his car. Derek had been murdered. And Marcus, who'd argued with him just hours before, who'd been the last person to see him alive, who stood to inherit everything now that Derek was dead, was the prime suspect. The police didn't knock. They walked straight into the Anderson mansion like they already owned it. By 9:12 a.m., Derek Anderson was no longer missing, no longer a son, no longer a problem that could be managed. He was evidence. Marcus sat on the leather Chesterfield sofa where he'd watched Saturday morning cartoons as a kid, now surrounded by police officers, grief counselors, and the quiet certainty that nothing in this house would ever feel normal again. Robert sat in his armchair like a king whose kingdom was crumbling around him, aged 10 years overnight. His steel-gray eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, staring at nothing. He hadn't said a word since the police had delivered the news 3 hours ago, had simply sat down in that chair and stopped moving, stopped responding, stopped being Robert Anderson, titan of industry, and became just a broken old man who'd lost his son. Patricia stood by the bay window, wrapped in a cashmere shawl, despite the warm Georgia morning, refusing to look at anyone. She'd been sedated by the family doctor, given pills to keep her from the kind of hysterics that had overcome her when the police first arrived. Now she just stared out a garden she'd tended for 30 years, silent tears streaming down her face, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the windowsill, so hard her knuckles had gone white. Detective Sarah Morrison was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and patient in a way that made Marcus profoundly nervous. She had short dark hair streaked with premature gray and wore a no-nonsense pantsuit that had seen better days. She'd been gentle at first, offering condolences that seemed genuine, asking routine questions about Derek's habits and friends and recent state of mind. But as the interview progressed, her tone shifted. The questions became sharper, more pointed, circling closer and closer to Marcus like a shark sending blood in the water. "Your brother sent you 14 angry texts the night he died," Morrison said, scrolling through Derek's phone records on her tablet, starting at 8:32 p.m. and continuing until 9:41 p.m., progressively more hostile. Neighbors in your building reported hearing you two fighting around 9 p.m. Mrs. Kowalski and Forby said it sounded violent, that she heard shouting and something breaking. "We argued," Marcus admitted, his voice hoarse from answering questions for hours. "Derek was drunk and angry about something, but I didn't kill him. He left around 10:15. He was alive." "Where were you between midnight and 3 a.m.? "Home. Asleep. My wife can confirm." "Your wife was at her book club until 11 p.m., Morrison interrupted, consulting her notes. Then she went straight to her sister's place in Decatur because they were planning an early morning garage sale. She didn't come home until 8 a.m. So actually, Mr. Anderson, no one can confirm your whereabouts during the window when your brother was killed." Marcus felt the walls closing in. He should call a lawyer. He knew he should call a lawyer. But calling a lawyer made him look guilty, and he wasn't guilty. He hadn't killed Derek. He'd wanted to sometimes. What siblings didn't have those fleeting thoughts during arguments, but wanting and doing were different universes. Morrison laid out the evidence like cards in a poker game, each one more damning than the last. Gunpowder residue on Marcus's navy jacket, the one he'd worn to a shooting range 3 days prior with a client who enjoyed skeet shooting. Perfectly innocent, perfectly explainable, but damningly coincidental given the timing. His phone's GPS showed a gap in location data from 1:15 to 2:47 a.m. Marcus had put it in airplane mode because he was a light sleeper and didn't want to be disturbed by late-night work emails. But now it looked like he was hiding his movements, like he'd deliberately disabled tracking to create an alibi gap. Witnesses who could testify to the brothers' deteriorating relationship, co-workers who'd heard arguments at the office, Family friends who'd noticed tension at gatherings, Derek's girlfriend who said Derek had become increasingly paranoid about Marcus trying to steal his birthright. And then Morrison dropped a real bombshell, the evidence that made Marcus's blood run cold. Did you know your father set up a $2 million life insurance policy on Derek 15 years ago, naming you as a beneficiary? Marcus's mouth went dry. What? No, that's impossible. I would have known. It was part of comprehensive estate planning done in 2009, Morrison explained, sliding a document across the coffee table. Both sons had policies on each other, each naming the other as beneficiary. Standard practice for wealthy families, apparently, though it seems morbid to me. Robert spoke for the first time since the questioning began, his voice hoarse and broken, barely recognizable as a commanding baritone that had negotiated million-dollar deals. It was just prudent financial planning. My lawyer suggested it. If anything happened to either boy, at least the surviving son would have resources to handle funeral costs, estate complications, whatever might come up. It was supposed to be protection, not motive for murder. Prudent, Morrison repeated flatly, her skepticism evident. $2 million is quite a lot of protection. She paused, letting that sink in, then continued. And there's one more thing you should know, Mr. Anderson. We found evidence that you visited Vincent Calabrese's salvage yard the day before the murder. Your car was captured on a traffic camera on Industrial Boulevard at 2:17 p.m., heading directly toward his business. Care to explain why you'd be visiting your father's former business partner? The room went absolutely silent. Patricia made a small sound, almost a whimper, like an animal caught in a trap. Robert turned to stare at Marcus with complete bewilderment, his grief momentarily forgotten in the face of this bizarre revelation. Who the hell is Vincent Calabrese? Robert demanded, finding his voice again. Why would you be visiting him? I haven't spoken to that man in over 20 years, not since I bought him out. What's going on, Marcus? Before Marcus could formulate an answer that wouldn't detonate the nuclear secret sitting at the center of his life, Morrison continued with the most devastating piece of evidence yet. Vincent Calabrese's fingerprints are all over your brother's car. On the door handle, the steering wheel, the gear shift. And we found Derek's blood on a wrench in Calabrese's office. Mr. Calabrese is currently in custody, but he's not talking without his lawyer present. The interrogation moved to the police station downtown, a brutalist concrete building that seemed designed to crush hope. Marcus sat in an airless interview room that smelled of stale coffee and desperation, across from Morrison and her partner, a silent older detective who just watched Marcus with eyes that had seen every kind of lie humans could tell. Then Vincent Calabrese's attorney arrived, and everything changed. Rebecca Talmadge was a sharp-dressed woman in her 50s who'd made her career defending difficult clients, the kind of criminals who were probably guilty but deserved representation anyway. She wore an expensive suit and carried a briefcase that probably cost more than Vincent's monthly income from the salvage yard. My client is willing to cooperate fully, she announced, her voice crisp and professional. But you need to hear this first. All of it. She placed a digital recorder on the table between them, an old-fashioned device that seemed out of place in the modern era. 3 days ago, Patricia Anderson visited my client at his place of business, wearing a wire. She was attempting to determine whether Mr. Calabrese would pose a threat to her family if he learned certain sensitive information. Morrison leaned forward, interested now. What information? That Marcus Anderson is Vincent Calabrese's biological son, the product of an affair that occurred 33 years ago. Mrs. Anderson had just learned that Marcus had taken a DNA test that revealed the truth of his paternity, and she wanted to assess Mr. Calabrese's likely reaction. Robert, who'd insisted on being present for the interview despite Morrison's protests, made a sound like he'd been shot. He stood up, his chair clattering backward, and just stared at Marcus like he was looking at a stranger, which, Marcus supposed, he was. That's not possible, Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was looking at Marcus's amber eyes now, really looking. Perhaps seeing for the first time what had been there all along, features that had never quite matched the Anderson family template. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered. I just found out. I didn't know. I've never known. But Robert wasn't listening. He walked out of the interview room without another word, his footsteps echoing down the hallway like a death march. The sound of the door closing behind him felt like a coffin lid slamming shut on Marcus's old life. Play the recording, Morrison ordered. Rebecca pressed play, and Patricia's voice filled the room, tinny through the small speaker but unmistakable. Marcus listened to his mother confess everything to Vincent. The affair, the pregnancy, the decades of deception. Vincent's response was surprisingly subdued, more sad than angry, the reaction of a man who'd already lost so much that one more loss barely registered. I have a son? Vincent's recorded voice was thick with emotion. All this time, I had a son and didn't know it? Didn't get to watch him grow up? Teach him things, be there for him? He can never know you're his father, Patricia said on the tape. The family business, the inheritance, Robert's trust, it all depends on Robert believing Marcus is his biological child. If this comes out, Marcus loses everything. I don't want your money, Vincent replied, his voice rough. I don't want anything from you people, but I'd like to meet him. Just once. Just to see him, talk to him, know who he is. Is that so wrong? It's not possible. I'm sorry, Vincent. I just needed you to know, in case he ever came looking for answers, in case he ever asked questions. Please, just let this stay buried. For his sake, if not for mine. For his sake, Vincent repeated bitterly. Everything's always for someone else's sake. Never mind what I might want, what I might have wanted all these years. The recording should have ended there. Marcus heard his mother's footsteps, the sound of a door opening and closing. Silence for almost a full minute, just the ambient noise of the salvage yard, distant traffic, birds, the clank of metal on metal. Then the office door opened again, and a new voice entered the recording. Derek's voice, slurred with alcohol and venom, instantly recognizable. So you're the bastard who destroyed my family. Marcus closed his eyes, not wanting to hear what came next, but unable to stop the playback. I don't know what you're talking about, Vincent said on the tape, wary now, probably confused about why another stranger was confronting him. Don't play dumb. I followed her here. I heard everything through the window. Marcus isn't my real brother. He's your bastard son. And you know what that means? It means he's been stealing my inheritance for 32 years. It means everything that should have been mine, everything I've worked for, has been diluted, shared, given to someone who isn't even an Anderson. Kid, I just found out about this myself. I didn't even know the boy existed until 10 minutes ago. Don't call me kid. And don't think you can use this information to shake down my family. I'll bury you. I'll make up charges, plant evidence, do whatever it takes to put you back in prison where you belong. Unless what? Vincent sounded tired now, resigned, like he'd been through this kind of threat before. Unless you disappear. Take this cash, the sound of something being thrown on a desk, bills fluttering, and get out of Georgia. Tonight, forever. Because if you're still here tomorrow, I'm going to the police with a story about how you've been stalking my family, threatening my mother, trying to extort us. Who do you think they'll believe? A convicted killer or the son of Robert Anderson? I'm not going anywhere, and you can't threaten me. I've done my time. I'm living clean, and I don't respond to... The sound of a scuffle, chairs scraping, something heavy hitting the floor. Derek's voice raised now. Stay away from my family. Stay away from Marcus. Get your hands off me, Vincent shouted. I said stay away. Derek again, and then the sound of fabric tearing, something metallic sliding across the surface. Is that a knife? Are you threatening me with a knife in my own office? Vincent's voice took on a desperate edge. I'm warning you. A gunshot, impossibly loud in an enclosed space. Then another, almost immediate, a long silence, broken only by ragged breathing. Then Derek's voice, weaker now, shocked and disbelieving. You shot me. You actually shot me. I'm bleeding. Oh, God, I'm bleeding so much. You came at me with a knife. You were going to stab me. I didn't. This was self-defense. You lunged at me and I just reacted. Vincent's voice was panicked, spiraling into terror. No one will believe you. Derek's words were coming slower now, thick and wet-sounding, like his lungs were filling with blood. Convicted killer shoots the son of Atlanta's most powerful family. You're finished. Old man. You're going back to prison for the rest of your life. And it'll be a life sentence this time. Murder one. No. This was an accident. You attacked me. You brought the knife. But Derek didn't respond. The recording captured several more minutes of Vincent's increasing panic, his frantic attempts to stop the bleeding, his realization that Derek was dying or already dead, his sobbing confession to the empty air as he tried to figure out what to do. I didn't mean to kill him. I didn't mean to kill anyone. He came at me. I was just defending myself. But no one will believe me. They never believe people like me. Ex-con kills rich kid. That's the story they'll tell. Doesn't matter what really happened. The recording captured the next hour in excruciating detail. Vincent's desperate, incompetent attempt to stage an accident. He dragged Derek's body to the Mercedes, drove it to the remote stretch of Old Marietta Road, positioned Derek in the driver's seat, then sent the car into a tree at low speed. It was sloppy, desperate work, the kind of plan that falls apart under the first real scrutiny. And through it all, Vincent talked to himself, a running commentary of fear and self-recrimination, and prayers to a God he wasn't sure was listening. I'm sorry, Derek. I'm so sorry. You were just protecting your family. You shouldn't have died for that. This isn't fair. None of this is fair. The trial stretched on for 8 months and consumed Atlanta in the way scandals always do, loudly, relentlessly, and without mercy. Every detail was dissected, every lie replayed, every private failure turned into public entertainment. In the end, Vincent Calabrese pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, not because the truth was unclear, but because the truth didn't matter as much as what a jury could believe. He was sentenced to 15 years. For a man his age, it might as well have been forever. Vincent Calabrese pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, accepting a plea deal rather than risk a murder conviction at trial. The prosecution pushed hard for murder one, arguing premeditation, and attempting to suppress the recording that proved Derek had attacked first. But Rebecca Talmadge was a fierce advocate, and the audio evidence was incontrovertible. Vincent described Derek pulling the knife from his own pocket. Expensive gentleman's folding knife with Derek's initials engraved on it. He explained how Derek had lunged across the desk, how Vincent had pulled his gun from the drawer in pure panic, how the shots had been fired in the terrified reflex of a man who thought he was about to be stabbed. The jury couldn't convict on murder with that recording. Self-defense was too plausible. But they also couldn't ignore that Vincent had tried to cover up the killing, had staged an accident, had fled the scene. Voluntary manslaughter was the compromise. He received 15 years, with the possibility of parole in 8. For a man in his mid-60s with a prior manslaughter conviction, it was effectively a life sentence. The real damage wasn't measured in years or sentences. It landed quietly, one loss at a time. Robert divorced Patricia. Patricia lost her grip on reality. Marcus lost the only family he had ever known. The judge divided their assets with mathematical precision, caring nothing for the emotional carnage. Robert kept the company. Patricia got the Roswell mansion, and enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Neither of them got what they really wanted. Their son back, their family intact, the life they built together before DNA tests and bullets and truth. Robert removed Marcus from the company in a terse email sent through his attorney. There was no board meeting, no explanation, just a severance package and a notification that his access to company systems had been terminated. Marcus was written out of the Anderson empire with the efficiency of a line item being deleted from a spreadsheet. You might be blood to someone, Robert said quietly, but you're not my son. That was all. No shouting, no anger. Just a door closing that Marcus knew would never open again. Those words, an echo of Patricia's nobody important, cut deeper than any knife Derek might have wielded. Patricia suffered a complete mental breakdown in the aftermath. The guilt of Derek's death, the destruction of her marriage, the exposure of her decades-long deception. It was too much for her carefully maintained facade to withstand. She was institutionalized at a private psychiatric facility in Chattanooga, an expensive place with gardens and therapy and medication that kept her in a fog of medicated numbness. She spent her days in that fog, sometimes asking nurses when her sons were coming to visit, forgetting that one was dead and the other had been instructed by her lawyers to stay away for the sake of her mental health. On good days, she remembered. On bad days, she thought it was 1995, and her boys were still in elementary school, and everything was perfect. Marcus inherited nothing but a devastating truth and a biological father serving time for killing his brother. The DNA test he'd taken as a birthday lark, that $99 kit meant to reveal fun fact about ancestry, and maybe some distant cousins, had unraveled 3 decades of carefully constructed family bonds like pulling a single thread from a sweater. He and Jennifer moved to Seattle 8 months after the trial ended, wanting distance from the wreckage, from the reporters who still occasionally call for comments, from the pitying looks of former friends and colleagues who knew every detail of the scandal. Marcus changed his name back to Chen, his wife's surname, which he'd always officially carried even as everyone called him Anderson. He found work at a small architectural firm in Pioneer Square that knew nothing about his past, his family, or the blood he'd inherited from a convicted killer. His new boss knew him only as Marcus Chen, talented designer with an impressive portfolio, no questions asked about his previous employment. Marcus didn't volunteer the information, and in Seattle, a city of reinvention and fresh starts, no one pushed for details. Vincent's letters started arriving about a year into his incarceration. Hesitant at first, written in careful block letters on prison stationery, they grew warmer and more personal as months passed. The father Marcus had never known wanted a relationship with the son he'd never met, wanted to explain himself, wanted to be forgiven for taking away the brother Marcus had grown up with. Dear Marcus, one letter began, I know you probably hate me. You should hate me. I took your brother from you, even if it was an accident, even if he came at me first. You lost Derek because of me. Your whole family fell apart because of the secret of your birth, because I existed, because your mother and I made choices 33 years ago that led to this moment. I'm so sorry. Marcus kept the letters in a drawer, unopened after reading the first few. He didn't know how to bridge that gap, didn't know if he even wanted to try. What did you say to the man who was genetically your father, but had killed the person who'd been your brother in every way that mattered for 32 years? Sometimes, late at night when Seattle rain drummed against the windows of their modest apartment in Ballard, so different from the Buckhead condo or the Roswell mansion, Marcus wondered if ignorance really would have been bliss. Would Derek still be alive if Marcus had never taken that test? Would his mother still be sane, hosting book club in Tenor Gardens? Would Robert still have his sons and his carefully planned dynasty? The mystery of identity, once solved, had cost him everything he'd ever known. Marcus had wanted to understand where he came from, to map his genetic heritage like a blueprint, to see the hidden architecture of his ancestry. Instead, he discovered that some foundations, once examined too closely, revealed themselves to be built on lies and compromises and choices made in loneliness and desperation. And when those foundations crack, everything built upon them comes crashing down with the inevitability of a badly designed structure collapsing under its own weight. Some truths, Marcus learned too late, are better left buried. Some secrets keep families together precisely because they stay secret, like the hidden rebar in concrete that you never see, but that holds everything in place. And some birthday presents destroy your entire world. Pull the pin on grenades you didn't know were sitting in your family history, waiting for someone to ask the wrong questions. He never bought Jennifer another DNA kit, and he never will. When friends suggest trying those ancestry tests, he changes the subject. When co-workers talk about the interesting things they discovered about their heritage, Marcus smiles and nods and says nothing about what he discovered about his. At Derek's grave, which Marcus visits once a year, flying back to Atlanta on the anniversary of his death, the headstone reads, Derek Anderson, beloved son and brother, gone too soon. Marcus always brings flowers, always spends an hour sitting on the grass, always tells Derek he's sorry even though Derek can't hear him. He doesn't visit Patricia in Chattanooga or Robert in his Roswell mansion where he lives alone now, rattling around in rooms that once held family gatherings. Marcus sends his mother cards on her birthday and Christmas, cards that her nurses read to her on days when she can't remember who she is or why she's there. He never signs them, son, just Marcus. Robert never responds to the cards Marcus sends him, never acknowledges birthdays or holidays or the attempts at reconciliation. As far as Robert Anderson is concerned, Marcus Chen doesn't exist. The boy he raised is dead, a victim of the same lies that killed his real son, and what walks around wearing that boy's face is just a stranger. In Seattle, Marcus has built a new life, a smaller life, a life without country clubs or board meetings or family empires. He designs affordable housing and community centers instead of luxury developments. He and Jennifer have talked about having children, but Marcus always hesitates, afraid of what genes he might pass on, what inherited violence might lurk in DNA from a man who killed twice. "You're not your father," Jennifer tells him. "Either of them. You're you. That's all that matters." But late at night, when Marcus catches his reflection in a darkened window and sees those amber eyes staring back, Vincent's eyes, the eyes that mark him as a Calabrese rather than an Anderson, he wonders if she's right. He wonders if DNA is destiny, if violence breeds violence, if the sins of fathers are really visited upon their sons. And he wonders, most of all, what would have happened if he'd just thrown that birthday gift away unopened, if he'd never spit in that tube, never mailed it back, never clicked on that email, if he lived his whole life as Marcus Anderson, architect and brother and son, blissfully ignorant of the lies that made that identity possible. Some questions don't have good answers. Some truths destroy rather than liberate. And some family secrets, Marcus now knows, are kept secret for very good reasons. The $99 DNA test that was supposed to be a fun exploration of his roots had instead uprooted his entire life, killed his brother, destroyed his family, and left him stranded between two fathers, one who wanted nothing to do with him, one who wanted everything Marcus couldn't give. Blood doesn't always tell the truth, Marcus learned. Sometimes it lies, sometimes it kills, and sometimes it reveals truths that no one should have to know. In his Seattle apartment, in a city where rain washes everything clean and people come to forget their past, Marcus Chen tries to build a future that isn't haunted by the DNA that made him. Most days, he almost succeeds. But the letters from prison keep coming, and Marcus keeps not opening them. And the question of what makes someone a father, biology or love, genes or choice, remains unanswered, perhaps unanswerable, hanging over his life like the Seattle clouds that never quite clear. Marcus still keeps the unopened letters in a drawer. He doesn't know if he'll ever read them. In Seattle, people don't ask where you came from. They accept reinvention. They accept silence. But sometimes late at night, when rain streaks down the windows and the city goes quiet, Marcus wonders whether ignorance really would have saved them all. Whether Derek would still be alive. Whether blood should ever have been tested at all. Because the truth didn't set anyone free. It just arrived too late to change anything.